just stand for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm more like that on Twitter.
We are live.
Oh no,
It's okay, guys. Have small talk until okay.
Sure,
welcome.
sure. This is like when your camera feed is on. They're like, oh, you can say whatever you want.
Welcome everyone. I welcome you in the final of Nonviolent Communication series of live streams. I decided to finish at the nice number of 12 live streams, and thus combining chapters 12 and 13. And today we have Kevin, Algernon, and Pong. Later on, we will be joined by another guest as well.
Oh, it's surprise guest.
Exactly. He's late 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. Okay. I will. Exactly. I will take a little bit of time now to, like, maybe 2-3 minutes of time to set up all the promotion and links. Yeah.
It amazes me that you can multitask even that well. We can carry the conversation while you're working.
I appreciate, guys. All right.
So Graham, tell us, I'm trying to include you because it's so easy when there's not, and I'm not goading you here, but when there's not a picture, like that person is there in that space less, if you know what I mean. Like two
no,
people
absolutely.
talk and expect, like, oh, it's just, Kevin and I are just talking, and forget we're like, wait a second, there's like equally another person here. And it's odd how that works, but it seems to definitely be a thing.
No, without the face and the the body language and all, you end up losing a dimension or two in interacting with the person.
Yeah.
At least here you have, with the voice and all, you get some inflection, tone of voice and all that one. It's a step better than chat, just
right.
via text.
Well, and we're even like a half duplex above that because you can see us. Like, we can't see your facial responses, but you can see ours. So we're like, not even at the pure radio space. We're halfway to the next level.
Yeah, you can't see my reaction when my cat beats me in my face with its tail.
Right. So. I bet it's similar. All right, move. I love you too.
I mean, I guess that I can always imagine, like, when Graham is talking, I kind of think it's like this wise man statue that is talking.
Oh no.
It's just like made out of stone a little bit, but then it also talks, and magical number of 42 for some reason is written on the t-shirt.
Oh no. Graham gets 42?
Yes. Graham knows the meaning of life. Also, it's nice because like the projections are actually fun. They are like, you can entertain the idea that it's a person out of space, or it's just your next door neighbor, the one who's like very mysterious, let's say.
I think it's nice because it lets people focus, like they don't have to take as much of the person in with whatever you're saying. Like, they have to focus on what you're saying because it's all they've got is your voice. And they might have some token image that they can map to it, but they have to interact with you.
Yeah, I just realized it's probably not that much different from what I normally do, because I actually find facial expressions very energy consuming to like have to constantly be engaging with. So I actually just usually
was looking
close
at
my
your
eyes.
beard and I was like, how many facial expressions do we really get back from you? That's what I was imagining in that moment.
No, yeah, I mean, like, and that's a funny thing too, right? With the obstruction, certain features, but the like for me, whenever I'm talking, I actually like look away or I close my eyes, or like if you're saying something that's like really hard for me to digest, I have to like kind of sit and just parse that as opposed to take other sensory input in. So it's funny because I guess I have this extra layer, but I don't really use it that much.
And you talk with your hands, so your framing is actually quite okay for that reason, because if you're tight framed like I have mine set right now, I talk with my hands too sometimes, and it's fun. It opens up another dimension of expression. Sorry, Graham. We don't mean to be expressionists. Gesturalists.
It's all good.
Okay.
So I think I'm done. Okay. I'll do it next time. Nice. We have 3 viewers. Hello, everyone.
I love that. Welcome.
I mean, I still,
You might as well just jump on the call. I mean,
It's like a cafe. We're in like a little cafe. 2 of us have coffees. If you have coffee, good on you.
oh my God, I actually do.
Lovely choice.
I do have a coffee.
There you
I
go.
do have a coffee, but like,
So I mean, it can
might
just be
disappear.
like we're at a coffee table and we're having this conversation, and y'all are just close enough that you're like, all right, let's listen in on this. These crazy people.
Trying to final thing. Do you guys think I should advertise the final everywhere? I think I might have as well.
That
I
sounds
don't know what that
grand-
means.
Grandiose. Advertise the final.
Yes,
This is
yes.
it. Is this the wrap up episode though? Or are we
Yeah,
doing
that's
an
the
ultimate?
wrap up. It is. It is. We are actually in the wrap up episode.
Which
Wasn't
means
here from
after
the
this,
beginning,
pure
so I
violent
have to-
communication.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Like
Maybe a Fight Club.
that's actually
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
like I mean, also those episodes are pretty violent sometimes. It's like
Next
That's
Yeah,
fine.
after
is
this
Lemon
episode,
Locals.
after this episode, we take care of the Rosenberg pinata.
oh my God.
Yeah. Should be kind. We should really be kind to the man reading his words out of time like we do.
Sure.
There's
We
certain
should.
phrases in there where I'm like, I read something that he wrote and I, interpret it, not really for myself, but just like this will be heard as, and I was like from a 2023 perspective, and I'm like, I can't, I don't fault him for like an expression he might use that was common at the time or commonly held or whatever that's in the
Yeah.
book. I don't give any weight to that. But people would, like, we wouldn't say that. So that's not, I don't think, a valid critique.
Mm.
It's maybe an interesting observation of it, but it's not a critique of the thoughts.
Oh, Mark and Manuel are streaming live at the moment. Exactly. Like I'm thinking they are adjusting
Oh no,
the
are they streaming our stream though? Can Meta stream us?
No, they actually stream in Plato's Republic.
That would be
So
fun.
they have like 6 people in there. Nice. So there's
If you figure out how to meta stream them, let us know, because we can do that next. So
Oh,
like
they
we
would be,
watch
like,
their
so
stream.
excited.
We have a live stream in our room that is them that we can, mute and unmute and stream on top of their stream.
Yeah.
Might join their stream.
Plato seems very popular actually. Like everyone is like anywhere I go, there is everybody discussing Plato and Plato's cave, and I still am more keen to focus on Epicureanism. Like for some reason, it's just like the ideas that came after Alexander were more attuned to the foreigners, more attuned to the people who experience loss of home, loss of religion, and stuff like that. Like that idea that humanitarian kind of humane thing, like helping others, was introduced, rather than me being myself and understanding the world, understanding reality. I didn't mean to criticize Plato.
objective reality.
Well, there is like
Yeah.
a thing with Epicureanism where on some readings of it, it basically ends up having the same kind of conclusion as like the Stoic approach, where it's like the simplest pleasure is like contemplation, and therefore you should like do the whole examining your life thing and engage in kind of a philosophical mode of being. But it's I think hard to get that with a lot of the modern interpretations of a lot of these traditions. But that's for another time maybe.
Yeah,
big
but
topic.
also the friendship and connection with others was actually stressed the most. Well, like Epicurus himself, he was, even though he suffered like terrible physical pain, he found the only way, he had some stomach disease, according to reliable sources of John Vervaeke. Like,
I wonder if that led to him thinking a lot,
like that's,
you know, like to take his mind off the pain.
yeah. Spending time with people, like enjoying what you do in the moment, because like it's okay that mortality is there. I mean, you like we have to accept it.
There's a
That's,
statement. It's okay that
it's
people
okay.
die.
Unfortunately, yes, it's like it's unavoidable. I'm so happy we're alive right now. Everything I
Okay.
say might be
Right.
used against me out of context.
It feels wrong to say one thing without the other. I mean, like I agree with
Exactly.
it, but
I mean, that's like it's okay to deal with more oh yeah, now we are full set. Cordelh, we were stringing time alone until you finally here.
Welcome.
Welcome.
there's a lot of coffee going on.
It's like we are at the coffee shop
There we go.
right now.
Exactly.
Not required, but
I'm actually, I need to get my
not
third cup.
prohibited.
I can still hear you.
I just have to remember to mute before I sip.
Yeah.
Okay, let me refresh and see if Cordelh is visual and the location. I'm trying to find the
Cat
most
hair on the
optimal.
camera lens. Looks like you got a hair across your lens, Cordelh.
No.
No?
Oh, there? No, it's a camera.
It's broken.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's scratched.
Oh,
I need to get a new one. But it's been like that for quite a while.
Well, it can be a special effect. That's how we know it's real.
Exactly.
Authentic.
Yeah. I'm censoring all the books I'm reading.
Yeah, that's what it is.
So we have viewers in the room. So EM, Marcus, and Coast Fella, Cozy Vibe. Welcome everybody. And one viewer I cannot see. And Cordelh, you are really nicely on my right, actually. On the like Zoom just made it itself.
Nice.
So hold on, let me. So you're on that side, from me.
And you're on that side, I guess.
Hold on. No, I'm at the side of your window.
This seems like shop talk.
Yeah, sorry.
I agree. I agree. To both statements.
Welcome, everyone.
Well,
Welcome, everyone. Oh my God, we have
Pretend.
2 more visas welcoming in. That's
See, we
awesome.
can pretend.
So we will have Germany, Belgium, United States. Awesome. And Poland. So.
Not representing those countries, just, you know, people from different contexts. I don't really want to represent my country. That's why I say that.
there are certain
USA.
aspect of
USA.
I imagine there are certain aspect of our culture that are intrinsically part of us, but you know.
And even just like what's going on in your area, we're vaguely aware of. And that is good to know, good to understand.
Oh, Carl is also joining.
Nice.
Wow.
Has a sign.
Hi. Yes, Carl, awesome. Hello.
Hey.
I like that sign.
Hello.
And
Hey.
welcome. We did not start yet. We just like
Yeah.
welcoming all the guests in the final of
Gathering.
Nonviolent Communication, where we'll summarize the book, but also say the final, discuss a little bit the final chapters. I
So
have
is this gonna
prepared
be
6 slides.
4 or 6 hour session?
We can make it shorter. We can run through the chapters and just hang out. We all have coffee. I'm imagining Graham has like 5 coffees. There.
Yeah, I only drink them one at a time, though.
In a particular order.
Oh, that's awesome.
You could always go for 5 straws, and then 5 cups at a time. I mean, it's a lot of effort for what it is, but I guess I should try that one day, to be honest.
Yeah, I start with the double espresso first. It gets it off with a kick.
I would totally start with 2 Irish coffee, though. Yeah, I would go that way.
Okay, so I guess I can start. The chapter 12, liberating ourselves and consoling others. It's like I'm never sure how to pronounce that word. And let's get to it. So there it is. Generally in society, we are educated not to pay attention too much to our needs, because neediness is selfishness and neediness is weakness. And everything that is considered, what is my need, has a negative connotation. Marshall B. Rosenberg attributes it to actually generational programming that we have, even from the times where we had royalty, let's say, ruling. The idea that a human being can have needs that might be different from the society was frowned upon massively. And so, freeing ourselves from old programming may involve separating observation and evaluation, acknowledge of our needs and feelings, expressing requests in clear language, paying attention to the cultural conditioning that is influencing us. I have a hard time imagining having this level of awareness, like every moment I have to make a decision. It seems like a lot of steps I have to consider. Even though it seems nice when it's written down, still feels kind of difficult task to do. What do you guys think? And I will start with Kevin.
Yeah, I guess there's something about, so I guess I agree with your point, right? That it's difficult to do this, but I think the end goal for what I think he's trying to do is get people in the habit of shifting to that mindset. And even in his workshops, he like constantly presents examples where he just fucks it up, where he just like, I was like, got cut off, and I roll down the window to correct the driver of his, the error of his ways, and I say, idiot, and just like he just gives these, constant examples of him failing at this. But I think he's trying to facilitate the cultivation of a certain habit of thinking, which kind of I think is compatible with other frames on this kind of view of like, well, because like if you just do this thing where you're like, I'm judging you for X, right? Like I think, like whatever, I think what you did is wrong. It's like to get someone in the habit of evaluating, well, why do I think that? Like, what is it in me that I want to be satisfied, and what they're doing? Like there's a really interesting aspect of reflection that I think is not instinctual and is probably not specific to any one culture, but it's, I think, a good thing to try to cultivate. Tag out, as Graham would say.
Yeah.
Algernon?
Yeah, I'm with you that I don't know that you could really apply this in every moment. Like maybe you can aim at that, and then doing it, attempting to do it, shaping your mind so that you're trying to find ways in which to do that. holding that as you're going around in the world. That could be hard, but I would imagine that if you tried to do that all the time, and I'm making a claim there, that it would probably get easier, or you'd see more opportunities where the NVC or something like it would fit or could work, and you might try it. So your tendency to see the world in that way might be enhanced because you've been trying to do it, and you're just sort of shaping yourself to looking for opportunities and that kind of thing. So like the ideal of it probably is just an ideal. Like you're not going to be able to do that in every moment. And I'm sure the author does point to that in the text.
Okay. Graham?
Well, I'm going to have to be contrarian here, and part of that's my autism, because I'm kind of forced into that position with my autism. And it's a matter of where I deal with everything on the two different levels are very distinct with me, with the factual cause and effect versus the emotional shame and blame. And one of the things that I constantly found, and lacking in Rosenberg's, is a solid differentiation between needs and wants. And it's like when you're taking care of your needs, that's a self-care. But if you're going into trying to take care of your wants, especially if you're hurting other people, that's where the selfishness comes in. And one of the items of processing that I see that gets used is this idea of an objective fact merged with an emotional response, merged with a reason given for that fact. And again, a lot of reasons may or may not be realistic or rational or anything, but and I noticed that I think that's what Rosenberg is talking about with the programming, is trying to alter the way you process that complex, because that seems to be like a fundamental process a lot of people work off of, as opposed to more of the subcomponents. Going to tag on that.
I want to jump in on that and say that like that awareness of cultural programming that you, and it sounds really, sort of, I don't know. I don't want to even use the word conspiratorial to say, but the idea that there is cultural programming, or that you are culturally programmed by the culture that you're in, that I think I take as just a standard thing. That's going to happen. That exists. And so the author's pointing to that and saying, okay, so there is this cultural programming, and to be aware that you are embedded in that, and that you may make a lot of automatic decisions along the way because you are kind of culturally programmed that way. It's a good bias to recognize in yourself that you have that. So that part of what he's saying, I like that he's emphasized that. And that sounds in line with what you're saying, Graham.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Cordelh?
Yeah, I was thinking about what you read, and what came to my mind is this concept, the philosophical concept that people are sort of mirror to ourselves. So when we treat others the way they want to be treated, in a certain sense, we hope to be treated the way we want also to be treated, and perhaps even the way we need to be treated. Because if the person in front of us needs us to treat them a certain way, so communication passes through and through, that person needs to be comfortable. So they actually need to be, to be spoken the way they want to be. And to me, it taps on that, obviously, if I'm only talking about my need, then I'm not even regarding the person in front of me, and I'm dismissing it. But if I'm also going a step forward and I'm thinking about the need of others, I may also be thinking about my own needs in the end, and sort of reach a loop in which everybody's needs are required. My only issue with this chain of thought is that when I think about that, I come to this concept from the antiquity in which ignorance is a sin and knowledge is, a grace, basically, in the sense that it's when we ignore the needs of others that perhaps we also ignore our own needs. While if we knew the needs of others, we might actually get to know our own needs. And that's why I'm doing this loop, you know, in this mirror sense of observing others, recognizing their needs, giving it to them in the hope that, you know, the cycle goes on and they treat other people the way they need to be treated until everybody's actually treated the way they want and need to be treated, which I guess is still, you know, sort of egocentric and selfish in a sense, because you recognize that the sum of all that action results in your comfort and your need being achieved. And when I say comfort, is being in this situation in which you're surrounded by people whose needs are so met. So you don't even have to worry about that. You know, you don't have to worry about people you love having needs or people that you're afraid of having needs, because the two concepts can be really disturbing for an individual. You know, if you're facing people that you love that have need, most people would be ready to actually sacrifice a lot. And when you're facing somebody that you fear that has needs, well, you're going to be afraid and act in the wrong way. So that's my interpretation of that neediness sort of part of the text.
I actually like that idea. If societally we would all kind of have it normalized to take care of our needs, not to be ashamed of our needs, first of all, not to suppress it. So like uncared, untended needs usually lead to a lot of internal resentment. And this kind of enhances refocuses the attention to wrong things. I might argue it.
Sorry,
Yeah.
you're done.
I might argue it gets it influences tribalism even.
I was going to say that the whenever I'm hearing need, there's maybe it's the Graham in me. There's part of me that echoes and goes like, how do you know what you need? Like, it's what you believe you need. Like, we just leave that bit out.
I get what you mean. I totally get
and people might sometimes self-delude themselves.
Okay.
Okay, but let's say I'm gonna take what you just said, because I do want to answer to that. I do believe that there are basic needs that are depending on cultural foundations. You know, like for example, I guess being born in Belgium, I have certain expectations that are standard to my culture. You know,
sure, I can accept that. I can think of one that you walk in a room and you expect people to, if it's
greet
a small
me,
number of people, to greet you in some way, to acknowledge that you're in that space. Like, that may be a cultural example that probably a lot of cultures have.
Okay, that is one thing, and I think everybody can meet the need of others to be recognized. No, if you're telling me my need is to have the PlayStation 5 that just came out yesterday and with the VR and the gamepad really and all of that, you know, first of all, I'm not sure I can meet that need of yours. And second of all, I'm not convinced that it really is a need.
Advertising tells you need it.
Shut up.
The messaging from advertising tells you this. Does it not?
Perhaps my subconscious needs a PS5 with a VR, for sure. Perhaps.
But anyway, so I don't know. When I hear the word need, there's some complication there.
I
would like to hear,
probably has defined the scope that he means need. So anyway, we got to get
removing the link. Guys, I would. Hi. 2 more weeks, and hi, Georgia. Sorting myself out. No, it's 6 people on the screen. I'm closing the room. Okay, Carl, I would like to hear, what do you think about our awareness of freeing ourselves from old programming?
I love it. I love the conversation so far. Also, thanks for organizing this, Kara. And like the conversation was going, I've found the word needs problematic also, and I like to think of it just for my own internal communications. Just think of it as instincts, like people have like whatever makes a human, like everybody's got them. And then the specific ways, the specific strategies. I like how Marshall Rosenberg separates, needs from strategies, and I think of it as instincts from strategies. Strategies to get those instincts met, and freeing ourselves from old programming, separating the observation from evaluation. It makes me think. I think of it seems like Ian McGilchrist's book is, has been, that's the seems like a masterpiece. Well, a lot of his books seem like masterpieces about that. It's the left brain being evaluation, the right brain being observation. And I love how John Vervaeke's, the way he's teaching meditation, when I do that, I get down to my dantian, like bringing my attention to my sensations in my dantian, and sensations as sensations, not as part of, with no evaluation, before free evaluation, then I know my right brain, or the master, is at least in the room and has a say. And I like to think of that as it gets me into what how I hang my hat on it in my head, is like the special theory of subjectivity that brings me, that being in touch with sensations as sensations, especially in such a non-evaluating part of my body, like the dantian, gives me access to realizing that as much as I am in the world, it's just as true, and maybe in some ways more true, that the world is inside of me. And like Cordelh was saying, mentioning the golden rule, which we talked about last time, I think we were talking. When I'm talking to you guys, I'm experiencing your personalities, but I know that the way I'm not experiencing your personalities in Poland and wherever else everybody else is. Those are in me. Those are 100% projections. And when I'm in a fight with somebody, when I'm in conflict with somebody, I know my instincts, or, I've got things that are just projecting. That it's evolution has got some, is having a say. They're like, oh, this person's angry, they're evil. I've noticed, I used to work in a nightclub, and when somebody would have a lot of aggression and there was a lot of danger, I would notice that their face would turn into like a demon or a gargoyle face for just like a millisecond. And I would go, their face can't physically do that, and in retrospect, after having learned about NVC, and I realized that was just my brain going like, that's an evil person, and just treat them as an object just for a second. And it was beyond my control, because it's beyond my, it's not my ego, it's not my sense of self, it's not my idea of myself that's doing it. It's some basic instinct that's just taking over. So the way to separate it from me is to my attention. That's one way, if I can do it. That's why I got to practice all the time, practice, because no matter how many times I decide to do that, like you guys were saying, no matter how many times I decide to just be a good person and separate and be a rational person, it's just, I'm just a monkey. So anyways, glad to be here. Thanks.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I actually did think that sense of primal that like when in a heightened stress, whatever Marshall B. Rosenberg is offering us, that kind of cool mode, is almost inaccessible, because the level during the aggressive, stressful time, that rational brain is kind of asleep. And just before we move on, I wanted to check in with two more Wiz. Hi, welcome. We are talking about paying attention to our needs. What do you think about that? As an becoming Orthodox priest?
God willing, yeah.
We've I don't know if you heard the earlier part, but we have done to death the whole wants versus needs part of this.
Well, paying attention to our needs in a general context, I think, is a complicated thing, because there are different levels of needs that we have, I would say, and some of them are maybe circumstantial needs and more expressions of problems that we encounter through our upbringing, and also through our fallen nature in general, I would say. And then there is just give me 1 second, Georgie. Hey, thanks. Excuse me. And then there is there are the needs beyond that, which is I will continue in a minute.
Okay. Just
Circumstantial need needs to be met.
Can't hear us either. I was kind of hoping to ward him off of going further into the want need part of the discussion.
Please excuse me.
It's okay.
There are trains running by and they make him angry. It's
somebody's gonna bark at those trains, apparently.
Yes. So what that we have, let's say, true needs in ourselves that are beyond that which we experience and which we think that we have to fulfill. And for example, is I think this need for communion with other people. I mean, can definitely be something healthy, but can also turn into something very unhealthy when all you're thinking about when you're talking to other people is, how do I come across? Do they like me? Is this something that I can say to them so that they will think highly of me, or something of that nature? But I think that's ultimately, these things are an expression of our need for communion with God, I would say. And we can go into specific needs, let's say, of us and wants, and then we can dive into them and figure out what exactly it is that's being expressed there, because there is something primal, and these primal things are being distorted through a whole bunch of layers that we put on top of them.
I wanted to answer something really quick to Carl. I was thinking about what you mentioned about that feeling of anger while facing people, that are aggressive or something like that. And, I was thinking something so basic, so emotional, is a reflection of, evolution, the way humans evolved to face danger or stuff like that. But in the same way, if I was thinking about, for example, the feeling of happiness, what is it to be happy? And to be happy, I think it is to be satisfied of your needs, which may be a way actually to define what are needs in this conversation, because it relates to feelings You know, what is it to be happy? Just the same way as anger relates to feeling. And it also defines a little bit what is a need, you know, and not in the sense, what is it as an object or what is it as whatever, but what it leads to defines what it should be. I mean,
part of that I worry of having that conversation that I worry about is when you get into like, if there's a want need spectrum and someone's like, well, I really want it to the point where I really don't know if I need it, or I really want, like, I need you to use my pronouns. I don't, like, I'm not dying if you don't use my pronouns, but I need it. And then we could have an infinite discussion about what we mean by need and want and stuff like that. And I don't know if that level of detail is warranted for this.
It seems like any
It
definition
is interesting.
of anything is going to be, you know, go on and on. Like definitions are just, you know, they're abstract. And the main, my understanding, I could be wrong, but this is how I've been, my working understanding of Marshall Rosenberg's ideas is that the main need or instinct that he's talking about not doing violence to is the connection. And the connection is, you know, there's, you know, the emissary, using McGilchrist's way of talking about it, the emissary is the one that uses language. But if I can just sit in a room with somebody, you know, and our mouths are disagreeing, but if I can just step out of that and into my body, you know, my body tells me how they're feeling. And if I can recognize that and make the separation, put proper order in myself, stop doing violence to my connection, my empathetic connection with myself, that's the only time I can have a chance to then make a connection with the other person. And the first thing I need to do as a hothead is separate. Like when I heard the word separate, and I was like, oh, they're going to talk about what I need to do, which is separate myself, get out of the room and get back into connection with myself, and then re-engage. I don't know if that speaks at all to what people are talking about, but this is an exciting conversation.
Yeah.
Now, interesting. I want to take it a slightly different wrinkle, and that's the concept of there's a lot of their needs. I also see that pretty much you have relationships where you have our needs, and both of them overlap and coincide. And the problems only arise when either my needs or your needs depart from our mutual needs. And that's where the conflicts happen, when you have to have some sort of resolution there. You're looking at it from an angle, see the wrinkle adding something.
So
Here,
if a need is something that's projected from the person, like it's my need, it's your need, in what you're conceptualizing there, are you saying, and I think there's something to it, that the marriage, the hour, be it a legal marriage or not, whatever, the coupledom, it has needs. Like if you guys want that coupledom to continue, that bond, it has its own needs that it would continue. That might not be the needs of one or the needs of the other, but the need of that joining. Does that conceive what you're saying there correctly?
No, that's precisely it. It's sort of the idea of every group becomes its own entity, sort of in a egregore kind of sense.
I think we can go one step further and say, if a community is a community, it has needs. If a civilization has, you know, exists, it has also needs. If a culture, I think we can, you know, talk about any group basically, and talk about their need.
I have a painful
That's right.
association with the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. Spoke. And
Not always. Not always.
I think Marshall B. Rosenberg would disagree with that one. Unfortunately, like he would be like, no, that's the way you were educated. But actually, for a happy society, you have to focus and take care of your needs in order not to take out your anger on others. Like, because unmet needs again lead to a lot of frustration.
Well, there is an interesting point to what you say. I mean, like, for example, if I accept to sacrifice myself to make everybody happy around me, is that actually meeting the needs of everybody? I mean, I am sacrificing myself. If I consider myself outside of myself, if I take one step out and I'm looking at the situation and I would be like thinking, okay, no, this time it's not me, it's somebody else. But they're willing, they sacrifice themselves for the needs of the many. Is that actually something, right even? And does it meet the need of everybody if you're willing to sacrifice a few? I don't think so, but it's a moral question, I think, that doesn't really have an answer.
I think it depends on the kind of sacrifice that you're talking about.
Yeah, there's part of this where we're just like use words like weighing the wants of one or the needs of one versus the needs of another, as if there's like a numerical easy way to get any of those numbers that you would just be able to compare them. There's an expression level of it, and then the model of the mathematics that really aren't there.
Oh my God, a trolley problem of needs.
Yeah, the trolley problem is involved
Kevin
here.
is laughing.
No, but if we do another reference to Star Trek, then everybody needs to be saved. We don't leave anybody behind. Just like Kirk, and there is no lose situation.
And that's how the meta
unless it's an undeveloped culture. Again, they actually killed off entire civilizations in Star Trek. Shout out EM, big fan. It's like it's
Star Trek, like, not genocide, just to clarify.
Oh my God!
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for clarifying. Oh my God. I'm not a big fan of genocide. I did not think I need to clarify.
Many things that occurred that we discuss on Star Trek are just for comparative and exploratory notions.
I was going to say, and unfortunately, in today's world, I
mean, there's that's what I always liked about sci-fi stuff like that, is it looked at those issues. It didn't know, it wasn't an in-deep 40-minute exploration of it, but at least it gave you fodder.
Yeah.
I just thought of another way of separating observation from evaluation. I got to see yesterday is using somebody else's brain to I separate myself. I had a conflict with a client. I was in their house. This is a high-paying client, and I saw something that made me think. I had the thought really strong. This person is abusing their dog, and I was like, I can't continue to work. This is my second highest paying customer. And I was like, okay, burn my relationship with this person, or hate myself. Those are my two options. That's all. And I was just like, I get hot-headed, and that abstraction about wants and needs, I can't have a conversation with myself about that and figure things out. But I pick up the phone, talk to my brother, and as I'm dialing, as I'm just getting ready to talk to him, I'm already using his brain. And I think maybe these people are not going to abandon their dog over the weekend. And I thought of something it just all became clear. And as soon as, like John has said, Vervaeke said, if I'm, most of the time they did this, he cited a study where they asked people to figure out their problem. They always frame it in I'm here, I'm there. And then as soon as they start framing it in they get a little separation. And that's the separation that I found confusing, because it's separate observation from evaluation that we're talking about. but I also need to separate myself from the situation, separate, and sometimes help get somebody else in on it. And because in the real, in real time, when I'm in a conflict, it's just grace has to visit me for me to stay in my body. And if I'm not in my body, if I don't have the wisdom of my body now in this moment, then it's all abstraction, and my abstraction left long enough will make me a prison guard in a concentration camp. Like I know that it's just my abstractions will go wherever they go. That's why that wisdom of the body and the connection, the conscious connection with sensation as sensation, helps me reframe everything, recalibrate my abstractions back to this moment, what's going on right now, because I cannot define needs for somebody else. I can't express that like this. But if I get an empathetic connection, then I'm like, okay, it's all clear. I know what we need, and I know what our strategies to get those needs met. We're making conflict over the strategies, and I can start from here. Maybe I don't have a map how to get there, but I know I have a clear vision of what is going on as far as what the problem is.
It's like group cognition, or like community cognition, that like if you feel aware of yourself that I'm emotional right now, I need an outside advisor right now to so even that is awareness. You were aware of your emotional response, so you reached out to an advisor. I think it's also essential to our our primal nature, where we used to live in the tribes, and we would have the camaraderie of, let's say, brothers who watch out for us. Otherwise, we would be eaten by a tiger or something. So it's like there is a mistake. Like it's good, guys. I would like to go
How many
further.
slides do you have?
5. This is number 1. I have 5 slides, but I will try to go faster.
Well, it's not entirely on you, I would say.
I'm happy. I have a
places.
full-on party
Might be a 6-hour
the. Nah, we will go way faster.
Let's try now.
The question of needs is actually a hot topic, so that's why I'm moving on to another question. So we can, and this one is applying NVC to solve depression. Another very quick subject. So we can apply NVC to resolve the internal conflicts that often result in depression. And there he described several cases, but definitely what stood out to me was the exercise, where let's say we have this self-destructive sentence where like, I'm really bad because I cannot finish my work on time. Oh my God, I'm incompetent. So this is a self-destructing thought that makes you ruminate on the negative ideas. And he advises to sit down, calm down, and write that the same sentence, but reframe it completely with feelings, need. So here is on the screen. Carl behind me, yeah, there it is. The slide is behind me. You see it?
Not yet, okay. But it's probably coming.
When A, I feel B because I'm needing C, therefore I would like D. Is that what you're?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
This is the one slide. So the slide is always behind me.
Pointing to.
Yeah. So
I thought it was a
new
one.
No, it's the same slide. I'm talking about the same slide. I will keep changing. So again, the exercise he's advising reframe the bad negative ruminiscent thoughts to observation, feelings, needs, and requests. So let's say when I feel so when there is too much work, I feel overwhelmed. because I am needing to get things done, and the for request for me to plan better. It kind of gives the agency to a person. And yeah, guys, I would like you to just like to relate if you had a similar practice of this mindful kind of application of, let's say, self-control. In a case, like my particular question is about ruminating, the self-destructive voices inside us that judge us, tell us we are wrong. And if you ever had the practice of like stopping yourselves and using practice, not necessarily by Marshall B. Rosenberg, but maybe some other people. And first, I would like to hear from two more ways.
I think the only practice I would say that I follow in these kind of situations is prayer. So when I feel overwhelmed by whatever kind of situation, we have this idea of hesychasm, which I'm not an expert on at all, but it's the idea of praying from the heart. So we have a lot of I experience this quite physically. I don't know if this is something universal, but most of the time, most of the things are going on around here, like in the head, in the visionary field. But things, what I'm trying to do when I'm overwhelmed by things in my head, let's say, is I try to center myself in the heart, like physically here. And I repeat either Lord have mercy or Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner, depending on how complex the overwhelming feeling is. And I try to have it be not something that I'm doing consciously, because that again would mean that it happens inside of my head, but have it be something that comes by itself. I feel how it's flowing, let's say, through my body and getting the overwhelmment out of the rest of my body. So that's the only kind of practice that I do.
Thank you. I would like to hear from Kevin.
Yeah, I guess okay, so I guess the question is something like, what do we do personally in a context we're trying to like somehow interrupt this emotional or reactive response, something upsetting? One thing I actually just recently learned, courtesy of the Andrew Huberman Lab podcast, great resource for stuff, is a kind of breathing protocol, which is actually very, very simple. And it's just like, just like, I don't know if you could hear it, but it's like one deep breath in, and at full capacity, try to take another one in, and then just slowly let it go. And part of that, right, is to try to inhibit it relates to what Carl was saying about the, right, like if you're in that mode, it's like, well, how do you, and Carl had also brought up like, well, it seems very difficult in high stress situations to actually get right into like a more observational or reflective capacity. And I think that's one kind of straightforward way to do it that's pretty reliable. And also, I guess it kind of relates to what Carl was saying about the, like, you know, like calling someone else, like in the act of like trying to think, well, how am I going to talk to them about this thing? It reminds me of a really funny, I guess you can call it protocol or something, but like a funny approach to like solving a problem, whether or not it's like a personal, like if it's like really emotional or not, it's like, it's called like asking the duck, which is like taking, it could be like rubber duck, it could be anything really. You can talk to your dog or any animal, anything that you could just like kind of, you know, just project that thing is going to understand what you're saying. And then in the process of doing this, it's like, it's a thing I also found in my own experience during tutoring, where it's like really just getting someone to ask the question of like trying to formulate the problem to someone else is enough to kind of give them that sense of kind of like getting out of that like, oh God, like what am I gonna do? I'm like, everything's just like going bad. But it's like, well, no. How would you ask someone else about this? And as soon as they take that step, that's usually I found a very helpful thing for people to do. And maybe combine that with the breath thing would be helpful as well. But I'll have to experiment and see how that goes for me. Tag out.
Well, in that case, Carl, since you had been mentioned a couple of times.
Thank you. Thanks for the mentioning. Thanks for calling on me, and thanks for the reference to the rubber duck technology. I just realized I had a rubber duck in my drawer, and I threw it away, and I realized, and I just listened to Kevin, I just remembered why I had that rubber duck in my drawer. And it seems like when I called my brother, that in that story earlier, that was using that, it just automatically engaged that, even to threaten myself with talking to somebody else, because I'll buy my bullshit all day long. But as soon as I even think about actually framing it for somebody else's consumption, it just, my brain's like, whoa, we can't let them know how crazy we are. Let's maybe we should back off of this cliff. And I really appreciate the double breath in thing. I've heard that before. I've used it, and for me, it works so well. And I can't remember what the mechanisms are or the causation, but the correlation between landing in my body and calmness is really, really good with a double breath in, and a big breath, and then trying to force one in, and then just relaxing. And then the gentleman, the two Marvs, I apologize, I don't know your
Marvin
name.
is fine.
Marvin. Okay, hey Marvin, thanks. Centering the breath, and I'm familiar with that prayer as well. But go into the sensations, and seemed like you were saying really feeling, had a really good body connection. I have tried that for years, that specific thing, and I heard it was, some monks did it, and for my neurobiology, I'm too hot-headed. I gotta get even further down in my stomach, in my gut, and that Dantian thing really works for me because it's a clear separation, and my heart is just, when it gets here, I'm like, it's getting better over time with meditation and vipassana, deconditioning my response to sensations. But most of the time something's here and it's a problem. It's a red flag. And so I need to go down to my stomach or to my Dantian, where I'm just more close to just being. But again, it's still with the sensations, and with the sensations, that's what brings me back to this moment. It's not an abstraction. Thanks. Pass.
Yeah.
Really quick,
Marvin.
Sorry,
Yep.
I want to chime in for a second because you just reminded me, Carl, of another thing that actually, like, I forgot this happened, but it was so powerful. And it was like, I just touched my thumb to my finger, and I was like in the middle of a really heated engagement with someone I haven't been upset with for a very long time. And we were just like really in it. I just remember like that moment where I was like, that simple sensation of like my thumb to my finger, which you remind me of, because you're focusing Dantian instead of your chest, right? Or maybe like, the heat in your face, but just bringing it somewhere else just immediately snapped me off like, oh wait, I'm really upset right now. Let me just like take a breath, right? And then I was like able to kind of like just walk back from that state and actually listen to where they were coming from as opposed to what they were saying. It was just like, I was like, oh man, I didn't know you could do this. It was awesome. Anyway, sorry, Marvin, by all means.
I think Marvin said about prayer. So I would like to call out Graham.
I was going to say, I like Rosenberg's structure there, where he goes from fact to feeling to the need, and then the action based on that one, because that's very similar to the process I use with my autism, where you're going from cause and effect to the shame and blame emotional level, and then making your decisions off of that one again. Kind of breaks down with the need, as we've talked about. One of the aspects that, for me, when he's talking about depression is, I basically have, my take on depression is that somebody trying to force themselves down both sides of a dilemma, where they want or need something on both sides, and it's not realistic. They both of them can't happen. You know, you can't have your cake and eat it too concept. And it's like as soon as they head down one of them, it gets painful for them and they want the other one, but that can't happen as well. And then they're basically tearing themselves apart back and forth and they just need to basically, from my position with my autism, it's decide which one you're going to live with that you're going to have and which one you're going to live without. So I'm going to tag at that point.
Thank you, Graham. I just want to make a little announcement. I think we will do the chapter 13 next week, because I do believe there will be one more slide. I do believe this conversation will take a long time because there is a lot of issues to touch upon, and I enjoy when you guys have actual conversation more than rushing through a bit. So whoever is, it's like a first half final, and the next full final will be next week. Okay, Algernon.
I guess the only thing I'll add here is a lot of people were talking about like the in the moment thing, and like maybe you're agitated, there's excitement, there's emotion, and there's conditioned responses going on. And so this certainly applies there. But for my own practice, a lot of times it's not an in the moment. This applies to places where it's not an in the moment thing. It's like something happened, whatever happened in the moment happened, maybe a conversation or someone said something, or I saw stuff on Twitter or wherever. And then what do I do with that? And so when this says like, you can have something where you can use NVC to resolve internal conflicts, I was thinking more along in that space. And I don't use an approach that's quite like what he's phrased here. I would put this like in the space of tools that are shaped like that, which is to say, like, you have some thought that you're like, this is really obviously troubling me. I keep coming back to it. And the advice is like, okay, now look at it and take it apart. Like, why are you having this thought? Why is it coming back? What does it mean to you? How could it be different? And to encourage somebody to reframe it and come at it different ways. And that's clearly what I would say the author's intent here is. And so I'm not going to like pick apart his sentence exactly. I just think this is like one probably pretty well-shaped tool to get people to stop in the moment. And in this case, look at whatever it is by like what they're feeling and what they think they need, how they're framing the world, and then what their demands are of. And I would caution people to not read that like you would then, he does these in his exercises where he'll just say like, and I'm now needing, I feel like I want this, or I feel like, what is it? Therefore, I would now like D. And to me, that's like you're making a request to the other person, and you might be in a certain context and have a certain relationship with that person that you could make such a request reasonably. And you can also be in a position with the other person where that's not a reasonable thing to make. You just go like, well, I would like it to be this way. Like, well, that's fine. You can like it to be that way if you want. So I don't really think he meant the exercise like you would necessarily always express it like he does in his explicit exercises. Like he's in a context that he has set where people can say things like that to another person. But we have to be a little bit careful to say, yeah, don't do that in my normal conversations with people. Like they would have to know that I'm doing this thing, and maybe be familiar with what I'm doing, for me to just kind of make a demand of them and say like, I feel this way and I need you to be like this. And I personally don't think that is a useful way to go around in the world, to make demands of other people to be a certain way because of the way I feel. Like there's an inversion there that I wouldn't use.
I've had a lot of experiences, Algernon, and I agree with you. Like it's a weird way of talking. And I'm in a 12-step recovery program. And years ago, 12 years ago, my sponsor started, every time I would say, oh, I'm having a conflict with this person, And he'd go, there's this thing called Marshall Rosenberg. I'm like, yeah. And I finally broke down and started looking at it. I was like, wow, if I did that, I would be, I would be more like an adult. And for years, I have been trying that in conversations, and it's weird. It's really weird most of the time to say, when I saw this, I felt this, the needs are this, I want this. But if I just break it down into that formula in my head, it is one tool to break it, to separate. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then you start to understand the motivation, like your own motivations, and at least what your conception is of the other person's motivations. And now you're thinking about people's motivations and then you can maybe navigate, well, how can we move the conversational ball forward? So at that level, good on you, but you got to have another participant who's doing those things with you.
Well, the hardest thing, it seems like, as I've been doing this, the benefit is not in getting that request met. It's in coming to a point where I have enough order in my mind and honesty, integrity with myself, that I could possibly make an honest request. Like, I would like this, like an invitation to the table. And it doesn't have to be it, but it really, this is the hardest part. This is the art of it. If it's not actually a request, it does not have the magical effect.
I wonder if I'm not reading the expression, I would like D, kind of in a 2022 concept, where it's like, that's a demand.
Oh, yeah.
It's not necessarily a demand, right? You're just saying, I realize that I have a desire for D to be the case.
Yeah. Would you
And
like
if you
to
said it that way, it would feel very neutral. But if you say like, and I would like D, that doesn't feel neutral.
I've heard it emphasized.
Guys, I will have more time for free-flowing discussion. I would like to hear the ways also Cordelh uses in order to diffuse the stressful situation.
Okay. First of all, I'm not really good at diffusing the situation, but when I listen to you guys and when I read this text, well, the first thought I had was, when I feel hungry, I should go in the kitchen and cook. But to be honest, it feels like some type of sarcasm. So while listening to you, I figured I would actually try to apply it to myself. What do I need? And the funny thing that comes to my mind is that all of the things that are essential to my needs that have been sort of, taken away, or that have went unfulfilled or unmet or whatever, I found myself discovering that actually I managed to get through it. I'm still sad about it. I'm still hurt. I'm still whatever. But essentially, some of the things I felt I needed, I discovered that I can exist, if not if exactly like before, at the very least, like exist, And this made me think of, that concept. I think that's attributed to Nietzsche. Whatever hurts you makes you stronger. Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, or whatever. Which is an aspect of Nietzsche that I'm not a big fan of, because it would mean, like, beat somebody up and they will become stronger. But I do think that there is an evolution in the chain thought of somebody. If you start as a child, you have so many needs, and little by little, all of those needs are, they disappear. They go away, and then you find yourself not having at all the same needs, and perhaps discovering that the needs that you had even as a young man, you don't need them as a middle-aged man. And I imagine that as an old man that loses all the family members and who loses all of their friends and survives age, they would find out that their need to exist goes beyond everything and everyone they knew. So what comes to my mind is something also, like when you guys were talking, it felt like you were saying that we should express that concept to somebody else. And I find that when I look at myself, that if I had to express that, I would express it to myself. I need this, therefore I should do that, to at the very least alleviate the need, you know, to make it not as hurtful or not as stingy. But I also feel like many of my personal needs cannot be fulfilled by somebody else. You know, that some of the basic needs I have are just out of the picture, and that's it. There is just no chance for me to get them back. So, you know, I'm basically rediscovering myself, recreating, evolving into somebody else. So it's kind of complicated, because if I had to say my needs to somebody else, I would say, okay, I feel really sad, I need this, therefore I would like a coffee. You know, I mean, nobody can help me in those things, so the best I can do is have a coffee with me and hang out, I would say, you know. And perhaps that's a part of needs, you know, like discovering that the very essential stuff that we need, once they are taken away, well, it's up to us to live with it, you know. And it's not really up to someone to give it to us, or I mean, I could get angry, and I could get perhaps spiritual and blame God and the devil, whatever, but I don't have that much faith in my heart, and even then I would feel that it's a little bit like cleaning my hands of recognizing what is basically life. You know, what it is to exist, and what it is to, for example, love someone or love a situation, love something, and then believe that you need it, and then have it taken away, and then suddenly discovering that, yeah, you can get through it without it, and it's hard, it's cold, it's whatever, but you can get through it. Yeah. Well, that's my take. I'm sorry.
I think I'm gonna throw it for a free-flowing discussion for the next 10-15 minutes, and then we move on to the last slide. So basically we will discuss 2 slides today, and I guess it will take 2
Problem
hours.
solved.
I want to say thank you also to Cordelh for raising a need, the idea of losing the need. Let's say if we suffer loss, and then at some point, let's say, do we need that? It's like, how do we cope with losing something we needed, let's say. And that's a little bit off subject.
I think a lot of people turn to religion, and I respect that a lot personally. But well, I think it depends of, you know, the personal mind of everybody. But it's just that, you know, it's sorry, it was a parenthesis, really, you know.
Okay, guys.
There was Marshall Rosenberg has his last rendition or communication of his nonviolent communication. You know, he expressed regret in not having a better word, you know, name for it. You know, I think he wanted to call it compassionate communication towards the end. And another thing he said in that series, which is on YouTube, and he's very old, you can hear it, and he expressed regret at not giving some, he just said it doesn't have to be so many needs, you know, you don't have to itemize them so much. It's just once you get used to thinking about at the level of needs. That's what's important. And an imaginal trick that I've found that helps me in the moment figure things out, usually afterwards, like Algernon says, I only figure it out afterwards. Most of the time I'm trying to get closer and closer to at real time, is to imagine what's going on if this was a hunter-gatherer tribe. If I was a hunter-gatherer, what would I call the needs at this point? You know, it becomes more simple when I frame it that way, because I'm like, it's food, shelter, social, you know, just at that level, at that very gross or base general level of need. And then my brain starts to think different, and it starts to make sense of like, oh, this, and you know, and that formula of when I heard this, I felt this, the needs are this, I want this, just as a statement of fact, and just put order to things. It really adds on, you know, it gets me to the need place, that's also the connection. That brings me back to connection, because whatever I need, the other person has to need also. So just because I need a cup of coffee, they don't need a cup of coffee, but they do need social, they need entertainment, they need social connection. And when I get to that level, my brain is operating at it in a different way, and there's more harmony.
I was thinking that even the process of evaluating, you know, what, using that template or others, something after the fact, that ends up helping to shape how I see stuff the next time. So, you know, if I looked at how something happened in a conversation and I go, oh, wow, they said blah, blah, blah. And then that really, man, once they said that, I was off down a track. And then you realize like, oh, I have a super sensitivity about whatever word or topic or something. And I always see it this way. And by the end of the conversation, I'm not even sure the person really was saying what I thought they were saying. But, you know, whenever I hear people talk about topic X, I know that they are going this way, that kind of thing. So if you're even in the moment, if you're not deft enough to like recognize that this is all going on, but after the fact, you looked at that and then you're like, wow, okay. So now I know that I have a tendency to do this or see this that way. I'm now aware of it.
There is also
next time you have that conversation, you're different. Like you're not Heraclitus with your stepping into the same river twice. You're not the same person. So you're like, all right. And maybe you fall into the same trap a couple of times, and then eventually you get it and you go like, all right, I got this one. And then you maybe exap that to other things and generally become more aware of some of your own biases.
Well, there is also the concept that words mean different things for different people. For example, I'll give a concrete example because I also wanted to say sorry to have made an analogy without meaning to do it. But before I was talking about sacrifice and what it meant for a person to sacrifice themselves for the good of everybody. And it never came up to my mind that there was a clear reference of religion within that statement. It's only when you spoke actually more that I noticed, you know, what I was saying actually, which wasn't what I was saying to you, but it was heard as, you know, that. And it's interesting, I think, because I would argue that it's my lack of theological mind that does that. I don't go there, you know. I first think about personal human sacrifice, but perhaps it's a lack of you know, it's a part of ignorance within me of not having completely understood what it means, you know, my word to somebody that would be a believer, you know, that would hear the reference that I don't hear when I say it.
Yeah,
So,
but you can't edit that.
I can't, but I can say
Right,
I'm
you have to-
sorry,
you
and
can-
I can
You
think
after
about
the
the
fact,
future.
or
Yeah.
Right. So I think that part's good.
Yeah.
But the people will take a rule, and I don't know if people really do this, but they talk about people doing it where they say like, oh, so therefore I shouldn't bring up a topic like that because, you know, a lot of people have very strong opinions. And if I say blah, then, you know,
I can be
some of the
sensitive
people
about
might
that.
think this and some people might think that. And to me, that seems like a hyper constrained sort of a world. Like it's better to say, I'll say what, you know, listen to the flow of what I'm saying and you'll understand where I'm coming from. And if not, let's go back and forth on it to clarify those things. And this is hard over a lot of media, you know, where people are just like, here's a thought.
Yeah, beyond media, I want to say for art, it's particularly hard.
Oh, that too.
Yeah.
The
If
author is
you-
separated from the idea at that
Yeah.
point.
Well, not even that, just, you know, if a person writes a concept, it can mean something totally else to somebody else, you know? So,
Right. So should they not write it
yeah, and there you
because
go.
somebody might take it badly?
Ah,
no, that's not
there
the
you go.
world in which we live.
But I do believe a lot of authors, musicians hesitate to show their work for that very reason. Yeah.
Hmm.
I know. I agree that is going on.
We have a general problem of communication, I would say. I mean, not we specifically as a group, but in general. As you were saying, Cordelh, that first of all, the words that I use probably don't mean exactly the same things that they mean for you. I mean, which is something that to a degree we can clear up. But also that's why I was saying depends on the sacrifice when you said the thing about sacrifice that you could also understand as a statement about Christianity in specifically, because I think I understood where you were coming from. There is a way to sacrifice yourself for other people, which is not at all the necessary sacrifice that you should be making, which is more like an unnecessary suicide or something like that.
And acceptance of others, you mean?
Right.
Acceptance
So,
of what?
Others.
Others.
So
Yeah,
so let's say
think
you have a bunch of people around you, your family or whatever, and they all want your time and your attention. And sometimes it's necessary to give it to them, and then also to negate yourself and don't spend time on things that are important for you. But in other times, the things that people want from you can be toxic, or the amount of time that people want from you can also be toxic and can be something bad for them as well, if they don't get stopped in this demanding of attention and time. So that's why I think it's necessary to be very clear about what kind of sacrifice we're talking about when we're saying it's a good or a bad thing.
Yeah.
Oh my God, there are so many relatable things here. First of all, misinterpretation, the intention behind what we actually were trying to express, and the way people receive it. I personally had been misunderstood very often. Then another thing, to preserve your boundaries. Let's say when somebody crosses your boundaries too much, how do you preserve it in a non-violent way? And this is a good segue into our last slide, which is here it is behind me, like the picture behind. Okay. Caring for our inner environment includes focusing on what we want to do rather than went wrong. So in order to take care, she's like, don't focus on the bad stuff, focus on the good stuff and what we need to do. Then diffusing stress by hearing our own feelings and needs, quote subject, or diffusing stress by empathizing with others. Yeah, I would like to hear thoughts of Graham on that. Graham? Okay, Kevin.
All right. Well, Graham gets his microphone ready. Yeah, this is interesting because this actually ties to a question I kind of had for Marvin, which I think can be segued into now from this idea of like focusing on hearing our own feelings and needs, right? And it feels because there's a point that he made earlier about this idea of like being like a situational need. Maybe I don't know what the language you'd use for this is, Marvin, but like I'm just going to call it like situational need versus like a deeper need. And I wonder if there's a way in which one could orient oneself to where even if the let's say the needs are kind of like contextual or artificial or situational or whatever it is, that they might be able to point to something deeper than that. And maybe there's something to getting in that framing of like, and I forgot who said this earlier, but it's like, yeah, I just need a cup of coffee. It's like, wait, but what is that really like? You could do this move, I think, right? Where he's like, what is that really like? Do I need the coffee itself? Like, or do I need to have this ritual in which I feel comforted by the warmth? Like what, and you can kind of, I think, move into this, this kind of orientation. So anyway, that's where I'll go with that. And I will tag out.
I'll tag on that to say, just on that stream, where I've used I've caught myself using language, and then I'll catch a little phrase or a fragment of something, and I'll think, I just thought that. And then I'll look at what it is. And some of them are like, I deserve that. So I'll be reaching for some food. I'll have that conversation you just described, Kevin, where I'm like, do I really want this? What do I mean when I say I want this ice cream? And I go, oh, well, I deserve this ice cream. That is in that mix. Oftentimes it's like, I had a hard day, or I had to put up with whatever this thing was earlier, or I'm in a bad mood and this will fix that. Whatever the justification is, there's that, one of them is, I deserve this. Like, this is my reward for having suffered something earlier. And catching those thoughts. And then you can really, some might say it's like a rat hole or something, but I think one can really stop and focus on it in detail. It's easy to tell yourself stories about it, to make up a narrative and then start to believe it. So be aware that that's when you're doing this, there could be some fabrication there, but it's an opportunity to see what your motivations were, or what they might be, maybe is a better way to say it.
Especially when you're saying something like be aware of the narrative that you're following when you have, for example, thoughts like, I deserve this after something wore you out. Which is something that I wanted to say earlier as well. I just didn't know exactly where to put it. Is that the whole communicational problem that we have as a community, but also technically with ourselves, is that we're often we're not entirely put together as individuals or as persons, and so we follow different narratives. Different part of us follow different narratives, and one of them might be one that's rather not narcissistic or egocentrical, and it's doing things that are technically good, like putting up with people that are annoying, or helping people even though you don't want to do the thing that you have to do, but you're not really doing it out of love, or at least not only out of love, but rather out of a subconscious sense of superiority. Like, if I do this, I am the better person. And so if that's your deeper motivation, that's your deeper or your meta narrative, let's say, that you're following in that moment, then things that you do for other people, sacrifices that you make, will not lead to something positive, like a betterment of your character or a cleansing of your character, let's say, but they will definitely lead to a worsening of your character, because someone who's an an a-hole is insufferable, but someone who is like an a-hole in a more complicated way, where they are nice to you, but you exactly know that they are nice to you because they feel good about themselves and they think they are better than you, so they can now, you know, like they look down on you. That's even more insufferable.
I just want to add that I think this is a big part of Nietzsche's, I think, whole framing of things, which I don't think is specific to Christianity, even though that's kind of his main target. But the sense of like,
He's turned into a robot.
Like, oh,
It'll
can
pass.
no one hear me? Am I back? We're good.
I
back.
hear
Okay.
you pretty
You've
perfectly.
You've
Okay, cool.
unroboted now.
All right, awesome. But there's a sense, I think, in Nietzsche, which like, and it took me a while to understand it, but I think it's actually, I think to what Marvin's pointing to is like, there can be this sense in which like there's like a sense of pity of like, oh, like, you know, poor, you know, beggar on the street, let me give them some bread. But it's actually like coming from a place of like contempt, of kind of like what Marvin was saying, where it's like, I am a giver, they're a taker. I am like doubling down this kind of differentiation of me being the better and them being the lesser, which I think he really, really despises. But I don't think it's specific, right, to a particular doctrine per se. But I think it's kind of a mode of orientation that he's trying to, yeah, for better or for worse, trying to bring to light in some of his bombastic ways of writing. But tag out.
I totally agree. This is like one of the reasons why I love, as a Christian, love Nietzsche so much, because that's definitely something that especially Christianity or Christians are in danger of, because we have this general doctrine of love your neighbor and give to them and all of that, and love your enemy. But if we do not do this properly, if we do it in the way that Nietzsche criticized, then it will lead us into like in the opposite direction where we actually want to go, away from Christ. And Nietzsche was absolutely brutal in his way of burning that down, and I love it. It's amazing. Like, I always just one more thing. Whenever I read Nietzsche, and especially when it gets to parts like this, it physically feels as if he's like getting into my chest and tearing something out, and it really hurts, but you feel kind of better afterwards.
We can talk about Nietzsche. Cordelh, what do you think?
I've been thinking about many different confusing things, because I was trying to use that context on me. I mean, I can obviously feel that I have certain needs and stuff like that. And it feels like, actually, one of my first feeling about this is that he taps on intuition and reasoning both, which I actually like, because, for example, focusing on what we want to do rather than what went wrong. So, yeah, when something goes wrong, yeah, the way to advance is the only, it's by doing stuff and moving on, basically, doing anything, in the sense, doing anything we want, or we would have wanted in the best situation ever. Then about diffusing stress by hearing our own feelings and needs. Well, this one I'm divided, because diffusing stress by hearing. Okay, yeah, I see what he means, in the sense that we all have escaping toys, like I like to smoke, I like whiskey, and it's not a problem, but I do enjoy them, which I guess I should be careful to smoke and drink less, because my body needs to be more careful about these things. Then diffusing stress by empathizing with others. That one I do find quite interesting also, because what I have noticed is that in my worst times, I have a tendency to center everything on myself. So when I'm really, really sad, I only think about my own sadness. I don't think that other people have went through that kind of stuff since the dawn of time and things like that, you know. It's, or that they will still go through, you know, it just doesn't come to my mind. So stating that, you know, diffusing stress, own stress by empathizing with others in the grand scale, you know, it doesn't have to be the neighbor or the brother or whatever. It can be, you know, humans, humanity or whatever. I think that's also interesting. I have to say though, while we were talking about all of that, there is this concept, I think it's Epictetus, a Greek philosopher, who stated something really interesting. I can actually show you an example of this. Let's say I love this cup of coffee. This is my cup of coffee, and if anything happened to it, I would be very, very sad. So let's say that it breaks down, it makes it fall, it breaks down, and I get really sad because my cup of coffee broke down. But ultimately, the truth is that I don't really, well, I do love my cup of coffee, but it's the action of drinking coffee that I love. The tradition, the hobby of, you know, having a cup filled with coffee, bringing it to my, you know, the action basically. And Epictetus argued for something very similar on all scale. In that he was a little bit extreme. He argued that on the loss of family people and all of that, that it wasn't, and I think that's what he meant, that it wasn't just the loss of somebody that one had to reconnect with, but rather the concept that the behavior we had with a certain person can be reenacted, you know, found again with somebody else, for example. Or if we talked about an object, well, the fact is that cup of coffee can be replaced, you know, and basically anything in this world, sadly, I know it's a pretty Nietzschean way of perceiving the world, can be replaced. So that's what I'm, you know, knowing that truth, we can try to go beyond, you know, or grief from the things we need that are unfulfilled. That's how I would see it. Trying to recognizing ourselves, for example, if I lose someone, it's the type of relationship with that person that I also miss. You know, it's not just that person, but it's all the actions, the communication, the link I had with that person that I miss. And knowing that, I can actually probably reenact, you know, that in the future. Because it's not truly lost, you know, it's still within me or within the person that loses somebody. That capacity of loving, of caring, of being there for somebody else. But that's very antique philosophy. You know, it's
antique.
Yeah, I mean, that's like 2000. Right? Yeah. And
sorry, Cordelh.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Cordelh, you mentioned sadness, and how this has been happening since the beginning of time. It seems like Marshall Rosenberg's formula that I've tried to imprint, you know, hacks into that. You know, first there's, you know, when I heard this, that's the situation. And if I stay there, it's you said this, you're wrong. This is bullshit. Excuse my language. This is, or I'm wrong, but it's judgment and evaluation. If I get to feelings, that's what decouples those things. That decouples the meaning from the facts for just a moment. I'm like, it's a fact. I'm feeling this, sadness. I'm feeling anger. Anger is not, I've heard that anger is not an emotion, it's a strategy. And if there's anger, I'm still in the abstract mind, because that's also the left brain. It, according to Ian McGilchrist, it only knows anger. So if I am acting in anger, I'm acting on a bunch of abstractions and I'm separated from reality. It's okay to be angry, but to recognize that it's anger takes me out of the anger and shows me that the anger's in me and it's a strategy and it's connected, and it's actually me ignoring another feeling of sadness and of fear normally. And this can all be used in a positive sense also to express positive things. We're talking about conflict here, but this is so valuable and it's great practice to use that formula for positive things. But then when I get to needs, he's so specific. And this is one of the things I find so powerful about nonviolent communication, is that needs connect other people. Like needs, if I can see things as needs as separate from strategies, if I can separate strategies from instincts or needs always connect us. They connect me to my ancestors. They've always been feeling sadness. And it can bring me back to a felt sense of, I'm actually like a hunter-gatherer here. This is abstract, imaginal. I'm a hunter-gatherer here, forced into this weird, confusing, talking to a plastic box here in California. There's so many levels of abstraction, but I can just go boom, like Marv was saying, to my sensations. That reframes it, and I've heard that if I'm negotiating with someone, always choose the bigger frame. And if I'm negotiating with myself, negotiating to go to travel together through a rough patch with myself, the bigger frame, serve the bigger frame. And when I notice my feelings, notice them as feelings as opposed to sensations. I go to sensations, I'm like, okay, that's a sensation and that's a feeling. Everything starts to lay itself out. It's untied and it's blossoming. And then I can see that the feelings are there to serve me, to show me how my needs are being affected, my instincts, these things that connect everyone. And I had been doing violence to them, but now I can see that my feelings may be out of whack because they're not serving my needs. I'm confusing my strategies with my needs. And then I can serve the frame of us, of you and I. And even before that, I still need to serve like my needs, the wider frame, the biggest frame. It's Corinthians 13. What's the most important thing? Agape. I could talk all I want and just so wise, and it's like the tinkling of a bell. It doesn't mean anything if I don't have agape. If I can sing like an angel, if I don't have agape, like maybe it means all these different things to me. It's this realization that I am one. And what brings me back to that is, where are my sensations happening? They're always happening in their phenomenology. They're happening in the phenomenological, which is my awareness, or it's my awareness, and like perceptually, it's nothing. It's the darkness my vision is floating in, the emptiness that my physical sensations are floating in. That's the ultimate me. That's the me that does not change. doesn't go anywhere. And if I can get in touch with that and realize that my needs, my feelings, and my abstractions need to serve that ultimately, I also I have access to realizing that that's who I'm talking to. You know, I assume you guys are that awareness, that pure, eternal awareness that doesn't change. And from there, everything can come into order despite my abstractions. I'm getting excited, so I'll stop. Thanks.
Thank you. Algernon, you wanted to add?
I don't know. It's just kind of, I'm not sure where we are in the whole process here. So this is kind of my NVC wrap up of where's NVC, where is this given where we are in 2023?
Mm-hmm.
And because I've recognized a number of things as we've been going through these, the idea of like saying, I recognize that these are my needs, and then we have sort of a sensitivity to that. And then the idea, and this is, of course, I'm reading this through my own lens, the idea that when you say, and this is what I would like, and then the other person accepts that or hears that, honors it, maybe not agrees to it, but, you know, takes it into consideration, that you could put a demand on the other person and that a good person would accept your demand and do it. Now, I don't know that that's what Rosenberg meant, but hearing it through the 2023 conversation, that's how I'm seeing it. And I think a lot of people would hear it that way just because it's kind of our cultural moment to hear things like that. And it strikes me as, and if somebody's not meeting my needs, then and we're talking about nonviolent communication, then clearly they're giving me violent communication. And I don't think Rosenberg meant that in the way that we hear the words violent communication in 2023, vague as it may be. So just the idea, and that now he regrets the word nonviolent communication. And I would say partly because he can see how it can be construed and how people have said, oh, so this is violent communication. And when you just look at that, there's problems with it. You're like, it's not my responsibility. I didn't mean it as violence. I can't know ahead of time how you're going to take something. It's not my responsibility. You have to learn to take some responsibility for the way you take things, to recognize your own mind. But in our cultural moment, people are just like, no, I'm a victim. That was violence. You can't do violence to me. And then start to conflate all kinds of things together. And so I could see nonviolent communication as defined by him at the time being, you know, like a reasonable thing, but then as seen through today's cultural lens, just sort of making it into some monstrosity that is not at all what the author meant. And I think in a lot of ways, like just us trying to use this tool with the definitions, the flexible definitions for violence and other things is hard to navigate. Like there's probably easier things to try to apply that are less laden. And I'll
Graham?
drop it.
Thank you. Tag out. Graham? I can't hear you. Graham. I guess we lost Graham for a bit. Okay. So he talked about this idea of, for example, road rage. How in case of road rage can we focus on our needs and feelings, like to snap out of pre-learned response and blaming others for being inconsiderate on the road. And in the book, he like cited empathizing with, let's say, a slow driver in front of him, and thinking, what are the driver's needs? maybe perhaps I should not honk that horn and not rush that driver. Graham? Like, I would like to test if...
This is a test.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
There he
yes, we can
is.
hear you. There you go.
Oh, I have no idea what happened. I finally just pushed the right button that time. No, I was going to say some of what I'm getting from Rosenberg. I agree very much with what a lot of people are saying, especially Algernon, where in today's society, it's almost like to disagree with somebody is to basically, you know, invalidate and harm them. And that's the expectation a lot of people have. And a lot of his process is, you know, I can't use a lot of what he's saying because I have to make judgments so I can learn. If I don't learn, I end up repeating the same mistakes. And that's sort of key to me is I hate repeating the same mistakes over and over. I want to move on to new mistakes I haven't made yet.
Good way to put it.
You know, and like I said, he has a lot of very good tools. I think the idea that it has to happen within this bubble where both people are committed to the nonviolent communication process. I think, you know, as you know, it's when you move outside of that, it's open to exploitation.
But those spaces can exist now, like the kind of thing that we're doing. Like you could decide, like there's a container, we're going to try to follow this tradition or whatever. And so, like within that context, I think it's a much more viable thing than say like as generally applied with that exact expression in your own personal life.
Yeah, the person who comes up to you and says, "I'd like you to give me all your money."
Different.
Unreasonable expectations get projected. I'm going to take it.
Oh, wow. Thank you. So this is a wrap up. By the end of the chapter, he discussed the idea of instead of diagnosing people in psychiatric practice, he proposed and he also tried and practiced it for over 35 years using nonviolent communication. And he talked about his example of talking to people diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he was explaining to them NVC, and then one of the participants asked a question, clarifying question, and Marshall started explaining himself again, but slower. And the other participant said, well, he understood everything you just said. You did not understand his question. And then Marshall, oh my God, I fell for my own tricks. And then he understood that like the idea that we are dismissing other people based on the diagnosis, that prejudice instead of, and so that's like that had an impact on him. Kind of after categorizing somebody, you hear them differently somehow. So I was thinking about it. Maybe perhaps you guys had any experience where a patient, okay, like a therapist. Okay, therapist and the patient, in a therapist-patient environment, the therapist would snap out of kind of academic way of treating a patient and try to address feelings, needs, observation in a different manner, kind of alternative healing practices. I guess it's a very unclear question. So I will leave it open to interpretation. Would like to hear from Marvin.
I'm not a therapist, so I never had an experience with a patient where I had to snap out of the learned behaviors or techniques. But what I had to think about when when you're explaining your wrap-up question was our conversation yesterday. We were talking about Adam and Eve and Adam's role in naming things, and then his resort into tyranny when he's not naming things, let's say, properly, and then the way that they can disagree with that, and Eve's role came to mind, where she was the one who would mediate with the things that were being named. So that's in a sense, in general human interaction, the two roles that we have to play. It's absolutely necessary to categorize people. Categorizing people is not wrong. It's necessary for us to act in any way at all. But it's also necessary to be aware of our fallibility. Like we can make mistakes when we categorize people, and we probably will make some form of mistake when we categorize people, and then be able to listen to them in an emphasizing manner. I think that's the best way to put it, so that we understand where they come from, and then we can correct ourselves in our categorization, which is, I think, also tying into the meta-narrative thing that we were talking about earlier. It's like you have to find out which narrative or which framework you're using to interpret the things that you encounter.
I was going to jump in on that and say that not only can you be mistaken about these, like the labels or the conceptions, like the symbolic treatment that you're having to give to someone, and just say like, okay, well, I'm kind of putting them in this category, and then recognize like, oh, that was a mistake. We need to do those simplifications in order to navigate in the speed that we do, like make assumptions and whatnot, and recognize we can make mistakes. So that was sort of your points. And then the thing that occurred to me is even beyond that is that there's kind of a scale of things. Like I can, because they're always simplifications, I've gotten rid of all the nuance. I'm like, okay, so I'm talking to an engineer. And so you're like, I will sort of frame things like in what I expect an engineer will understand. And you're assuming then that that's who you're talking to. So you've simplified the situation down, and you've gotten rid of all the nuance and everything else. And so recognizing that not only can you be wrong, but recognizing that you are getting rid of all the nuance. Like you are greatly simplifying things down to get to this little symbolic handle that you can easily manipulate, talk about, but that you recognize that you are leaving a lot of stuff out. You're not saying it doesn't exist. You're just saying, all right, we're just, we're talking at this sort of a level of detail. And if we did go into the details of these words and what we mean and whatnot, we likely would find there's more here than what we've been talking about, or we thought we were talking about. So symbolic thought, good. Recognizing that we're losing some nuance, okay. Like recognize it's still there. We have to do it.
Yeah. Carl?
Thank you. Yeah. Yep. The symbolic thought. Yeah, problematic and also the only solution to being in the world and getting food and getting my needs met. Marshall Rosenberg's stuff, it seems like it's a way for me to turn conversation into a tool of, depending on how you look at it, meditation or contemplation. And to get back to the same place I want to get back, the coming out of it, a psychologist or therapist coming out of it. I also am not a therapist or a psychologist. And what color pill did Neo take when he's in the Matrix? What color was that? Somebody help me, please.
Red.
He took the red one.
The red pill. All right.
But he had the choice.
The choice.
Which pill to take. Good
so
point.
Yes, always that's exactly right. Always the choice. right now is always the choice, whether I'm with someone or not with someone. This nonviolent communication is first, and for me, primarily intrapersonal. It's me inside the little parts of myself, like Marv was saying, these competing instincts or centers of loci of processing, and to not do violence to them. And the perceptual frame of frames, that it's probably not going to make any sense, but I'm just going to talk anyways. I apologize. The nothing that all sensations seem to be happening in, from my perceptual experience, cannot be abstracted and frees me from abstraction. And for me, that's been the key to applying this stuff, this nonviolent communication. If I can recognize that right now, the truth is that I am in the world and the world is in me, and have a lightness of foot between those two perspectives, then I can apply this better. And Marshall Rosenberg's system ultimately brings me back to that. I need to, when I'm talking to someone, I need to bring it back to, I am talking to the mystery. Whether I'm talking to myself or not, I'm talking to the mystery. You know, as I look at you, when I watch your eyes move, I get a sense of what it's like to look out of them, like what, just for a split second. And it's such a, it's like, he says it's like surfing. It feels good. Like, even if you are my enemy, to look at you and to think, what's it like to be them right now? I always come back to the mystery. That's the abstraction. And the perception of the mystery is this nothingness. So if I can't keep in contact with it, but if I keep turning, I can't really turn towards it. Yeah, my words are failing me. I appreciate it. This has been an awesome conversation. Thank you, Kara, and thanks everybody. It's been, I think it's going to light me up all day.
Thank you. That was a very beautiful take on it. Cordelh, what do you think about alternative healing?
Well, yeah, beyond alternative, well, not beyond, but part of alternative healing. I think, you know, if a person is a doctor or a therapist, a cop, a firefighter in your house when there is a fire, politician that you need to make a change in the world for your sake, you know, well-being, true well-being, not just, you know, less tax, but actually some law that needs to be changed for segregation or something like that. Well, it's important that the person that are in a situation of authority, like the therapist, the doctor, the cop, whatever you want, that they remain humane. Because at the moment that they stop being humane with the patient, with the person they're arresting, with the person they saving from the house in fire, whatever, you know, it's a relation that's very aggressive, you know. It can even be very cold, and I would argue that it may lead to rejection, you know, that a patient would take something very badly if it was only empiric, you know, without emotion, without the therapist being a little bit humane and putting himself in the situation of the patient. And if it was a cop, if it was just by the law like that, without taking in consideration what are the event, the situation, that could be extremely aggressive too, you know. Okay, perhaps with the firefighter there is less argument because it's on the spot, you know, that you have to save somebody. But the concept is having that situation of authority with somebody else and either being by the book or actually finding ways of being more humane. Now, does that mean suggesting meditation to a patient or telling that that patient needs vacations or something like that? I would argue it does, but you know, it's part of being humane with the person. Personally, I would argue also that if I'm a patient from a doctor and they talk to me as if I was recording machine, I don't like it. You know, I might actually look for another doctor. So
Thank you. I know Kevin has a broad take on it. Kevin.
Yeah, there's a few different threads that I'd like to touch on. And maybe the first one, because I didn't really know about this one, it just came up. But I don't think I've ever talked to or heard a clinician, whether it's like a psychologist or a psychiatrist, think of like the diagnostic categories like depression, right, major depressive disorder, or schizophrenia, or pick your favorite thing. I've never come across any one of them who actually thinks it's like a concrete, static, immutable thing that actually captures all of reality. They're usually, and I'm sure Rosenberg probably understands this, but they're usually just these kind of shortcuts or abstractions, to use some Carl's language, that like, and to what Matt was saying, they give like a handle on the situation of like, okay, I know if I get the diagnosis of you in one of these categories, that then narrows all the things I have to think about. It makes it a little bit easier to navigate the situation. But what one hopes for a lot of these clinicians is that they don't just stay in that mode. They use that as like just a rough approach starting off, and then as they get to know the person, there's actually a much deeper, more complex relationship that unfolds, which I think was mentioned kind of offhand in Rosenberg. I'm not sure if it's the 12th, 13th chapter where he mentions the I-thou relationship with Buber and Carl Rogers having a discussion on that.
Chapter.
That's okay. Okay, so there's that, right? And it's funny because it actually ties into this next point, which I always, is it Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, which in that book, and that focuses kind of on trauma, which is a good read if you're very interested in the topic, or if you're ever curious, like, have I ever gone through this? It'll make it very clear, if you can kind of relate to some of the experiences that he goes through. But he describes himself, van der Kolk does in that book, of like being, like training, probably in his residency, I think. And I asked like his professor, hey, like, looking at all these conditions, these symptoms of this patient, would you call them like, schizophrenic or schizoaffective? Like what'd you call them? And his teacher, just kind of sits there and, thinks about it for a little bit. He's like, I think I call him Jeff. It's, which I think is a kind of hones in on this point of like clinicians who are trying to, I think, be good clinicians are actually also trying to connect to, the humanity in that person. And then there's another point that's kind of like outside of this scope, which I don't know. And it's kind of, I think, something that Matthew and Graham have kind of brought up, of like, there has to be another thing in addition to this, like, like creating a space, and both parties are trying to do this thing. But there's also like this more ambiguous thing, and actually Marvin brought up too, with this whole like general problem communication. Like we need a kind of like a meta protocol of like, when I walk into any space, I actually have no idea if the words you're using are like in the same frame of reference that I have, right? And so I should kind of just take a default stance. This is how I'm kind of interpreting it. This is the idea I got from, I think, Jordan Hall in a conversation I had with Verbeke recently. But like, this idea of like, oh, okay, if I walk in Twitter, if I walk into the comment section on YouTube, if I walk into any digital space or physical space, there's going to be this element of like, I should probably like recognize that if I'm getting upset or if I think what you're saying is just patently stupid or wrong, then maybe I'm missing something. Like maybe I should just like take a stance of like curiosity and be like, that doesn't sound right. Which I think is easier said than done, but is maybe a nice ideal to strive for, which I think kind of is around this kind of thing that we're talking about of NVC, nonviolent communication. Anyway, so that's probably it for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Graham, I would like to hear from you.
No, I was going to say, I definitely agree with a lot of the idea of communicating is better than diagnosing. You know, that's usually you go with the lowest solution first. And as far as, again, the thought that occurs to me with Rosenberg on the modern day, I don't think Rosenberg had any clue that people would be acting like they are today. And he basically designed nonviolent communication for his generation, the clients he was treating, as opposed to an everyday solution in 2023. And that's sort of my take on it. So I'm going to tag on that.
Algernon?
The idea, I like the idea that was expressed earlier about like simplifying things to a symbolic level so we can, communicate and talk to them, recognize we're losing a lot of nuance. That there can be, especially with like repetition at that simplistic level, that we just get into this automatic mode where you're like, yeah, that's how I respond to this. And so I think at some point, I forget who it was mentioning sort of in a medical space that there could be, or maybe I just thought of this. In that space, there's like some simplified rules where you just say, well, this is how you do the diagnosis. If they get this, then that means this, and then that's that. And that's a nice framework and guidelines, perhaps, but then to reduce the whole system to just that symbolic level treatment, like you're getting rid of all the nuance, you're losing all the nuance, and it might even work at scale, but it's very inhuman, because in any given individual's case, like the system of those steps may miss some, really weird zebra thing going on. And it's really the responsibility of the physician to actually communicate with that person and try to get the big picture and recognize, oh, okay, this looks like such and such, but it's actually something very different. What's going on with you? And if they just like go down the first thing, like, oh, we match this, well, that means we need pill, blah. That this regular exposure to something, to a pattern like that, with these symbolic simplified rules, which are handy to set the framework. If we get into the habit of only ever doing that and having that robotic procedural way that's very symbolic and ignores all the nuance of the situation, that's pretty, I don't know, hollow. It's inhuman to follow at that level. So to me, this nonviolent communication concept feels like when you're like, okay, maybe there's the symbolic superficial ways that are easy to communicate that we do a lot, and we have automatic responses. When they say this, I say that. Fine, if you're into that. But if you want to have a more authentic level of conversation, you have to put that aside in yourself and hopefully not participate with others at that level, and try to get to this deeper level of authentic back and forth, really trying to explore the other's mind, see what their motivations are, understand your own, all those things that he points to in the book.
I would like to chime in here for a second, because I think you're right, and I think that's one of the more complicated things. Let's say if our symbolic notion is to be a proper communicator in conversation with other people, or is a proper gardener our community or even our own personhood, then that's a generally easy to grasp principle. But the way in which we do that is a lot more complicated. And so if you know, your notion of gardening is only mowing the grass every month, then your garden will not look very pretty after some time. So there's a lot more complex things that come into play afterwards, I would say. And I think, like, on another note, the idea of a doctor treating his patient like a machine and not like a person is a general symptom that we can observe in modernity, where we kind of think, partly maybe through our scientific discoveries and the overtaking of the mindset of what's the name of the whole French Revolution thing, Enlightenment movement. It gave us the in my eyes false idea that we can remove ourselves from the situations that we're in entirely and be like this objective observer, which puts everything into this clinical, very, very sterile environment. And we cannot do that. Even if we could, it wouldn't be good for us, but we cannot do that. And we try to do that in our personal relationships, and we try to do that in our general endeavors, and it makes us sick, and it makes us sick even in a direct way. And we can see that also in the patient doctor relationship, when they're looking at you like a number, you're getting this medicine, you're getting this medicine, or I'm going to do psychological analysis with you, but you're doing all of this in a non-personal way. That's not going to work, because we are always, just one more sentence, we are always operating in some form of narrative, and we cannot remove ourselves from that. Removing ourselves from that is also a kind of narrative, but it's one that doesn't lead to something healthy, let's say.
You made me think of the therapy thing again, where if somebody, even, we talked about the labels, like if the psychologist thinks you are whatever, and so they're thinking in terms of a diagnosis, and they know that the clinical requirements for that diagnosis are blah, blah, and blah. And then they start steering the conversation to basically ask you the questions without asking you the questions to see how you fit with those criteria. Like that, even that shaping of that conversation toward those diagnostic goals is not necessarily a useful thing for that patient. Like your intuition about that might have been totally wrong. So, that's recognizing that you've got this like structural, I'm reluctant to say systematic bias, but that the procedures of the thing that you've already agreed to, of like, I've got a book, it's got a bunch of things, we try to figure out which one you are and help you along those lines. Like there's a lot of assumptions that are built just into that. And the real authentic thing where you're just talking to a person, that's still going on too.
Yeah, I actually agree with that idea that people, categorizing people based on their past actions is maybe convenient, but it's fallible. Like it's not accurate. People change, and past behaviors may be caused by something that they overcome. Like John Verweke talks about the agent and arena. If you change the arena and the agent receives a different role to play on the arena, it happened also that even some addictive behaviors were dropped the moment arena changed. And if the person would be diagnosed based on the old arena, let's say, old stage that the person played, it might stigmatize and prevent growth for another human being. So I do think NVC in therapy, like that fresh approach. I'm sorry, it's very loud in my place. That fresh approach is, I mean, it's at least wise to consider. Yeah, guys, it's a free flow conversation for another 10 minutes, and then I will advertise your YouTube channels and close the thing.
The agent arena thing and the thing about not being able to be the observer, like that's absolutely true in one way, that I can't be the observer, like abstractly, like I can't abstract myself into it. But I'm just talking disjointedly, but you know,
Yeah, I'm not
Vervaeke,
like there's a bigger context that you have in your head that you haven't said yet. So I
Vervaeke,
can't quite
yeah,
follow what you're saying.
Thank you. Well, Vervaeke says you know, Vervaeke's in his meditations, he's saying what we're trying to do is make a bridge. He's saying slowly come out of your meditation because we're trying to make a bridge to do this in regular life. And the thing that I think is not, that Vervaeke's not expressing because it can't be put into words. So I'm a fool. I mean, that's one of my emails is I'm a persistent fool. And I apologize, but the thing he's not talking about is nothing. Like whenever I'm really in touch with a sensation, if I can, at the level of intimate level of, I can tell what shape it is. If I know what shape it is, then I'm automatically in touch with nothing, because it's what is a sensation surrounded by?
Can I just clarify?
Yes.
Do you mean nothingness?
Nothingness,
Okay.
Nothingness. And I mean, nothingness. He does
I
put
don't
it
know if
as
you're asking a
nothingness.
question, making an observation about your
Yeah,
personal thought
right. So,
pattern,
well, I guess what I'm asking
trying to find
is
a way to
where,
engage with what you're saying, and I can't find a handle.
thank you. I really appreciate that. And I perhaps will fail. So I won't do it long, but how do I know what I'm thinking? Like, I know I'm having thoughts because of phenomenology. Like I'm having little things. I'm like, oh, there's a thought coming up, but it doesn't have definition until there's words. And so I don't really know what I'm thinking until I say it. You know, you guys find out as I find out. And that problem of us communicating verbally with definitions abstractly is it's such a faulty tool. So many people have said. But if I can go to the perceptual level and realize that the perceptual level holds the abstract, that every thought is based on perception. Like I can only know what I'm thinking because there's a perception. If I notice the phenomenology of thought, then I am with you. Like I'm in the same place as you, whether you know it or not. You are in your mind space. Like we're sharing that in this way. Nothingness has no characteristics. It's infinite and it's eternal. So it's the same place. I can't tell my nothingness from your nothingness.
Okay.
Like in a way, perhaps it's I'll stop talking, but you know what I'm.
But so are you getting at like that ties into this age arena necessity of
Yes.
the relationship? Okay.
Yes, identifying with the nothingness is identifying, I suggest, is identifying with being awareness itself, of the observer. So I'm just awareness talking to your awareness in one way. and there's the same, that flip is the same. I suggest that that flip is the same flip as, yeah, I lost it. Thanks.
I think
I
sorry.
got it actually. Yeah, Kevin.
So I think I want to tie this into, because I think I get what you're circling around, Carl. I think it also relates to what Marvin was saying about this kind of illusion that we can somehow remove the observer from the context, because it's actually not possible, because the context is like the context only makes sense from the idea of perception happening, and perception presupposes a perceiver and the perceived, right? And that's like they mutually and I think I can like the framing I'm using around this is a certain kind of I guess philosophical standpoint, but I think it's also becoming what's the word? Like it's this problem of like the context, right? Always needing the perceived and the perceiver, and that like the thing that you can't really doubt is the perception, right? That's a way to frame it, I guess. But this is actually also happening, I think, I would argue, in the work of people like Mark Solms, who's in kind of the affective neuroscience space, Michael Levin, who's in like developmental regenerative biology, and then Chris Fields, who's I guess I think he's more in like the physics realm and like trying to get a general model of what cognition means, like to kind of independent of the specification, right, of the organism. And they have some really interesting conversations, which I highly recommend. Also, they're very, very difficult to follow without having some context about what each of them is coming into the frame with. But they're trying to get at this thing, I think, which is like there's always this like context in which like I'm, like I have an experience. This is like Solms, I guess, whole framing is around like I have these qualitatively different experiences. Like, being cold is not the same thing as being afraid, right? Like it's like, and I can distinguish those. Like I have to. Like it's necessary for me as an organism to be able to have those to be qualitatively different, and maybe for every dimension of these affects, of and he wouldn't necessarily call like hunger an affect, but things like a sensory motor affect to be. I think that's what you might call it. But either way, it's like we have these different kind of parameters, if we want to think of it that way, as a symbolic abstraction. And there's always like a valence. There's always like I can move towards, away from it. And there's probably some good equilibrium point that I want to be in. But then that's not just isolated. It's always contextual on all these other things happening at the same time. So if I'm like, if I'm a mouse in the field and I don't like bright open spaces because that's where I get eaten, but I'm really thirsty, right? That's gonna that can outweigh these other relevant things I care about. And I'm bringing this up just because it's really interesting to see this kind of emerging in Solms' context, and how Levin actually is very interested in that problem, and also how Chris Fields with this whole what is that field? It's predictive, I guess, processing, and it's also the free energy principle, Carl Friston's. These are all different, I guess, research fields. But they're all like, I think, trying to grapple with this in so many ways, and I find it interesting because it's like different bodies of science are trying to come to terms with this problem, because it's kind of like, and this might be a stretch, but maybe also in particle physics, where it's like the measurement changes the nature of the observation itself, and that just became right. Like we can't get past this now. How people make sense of that depends. The experiments have wildly different interpretations. And some people, it doesn't matter, but yeah. So I'm just trying to bring up that I think this is a problem that's become evident in multiple spaces in science, and that there is a push towards acknowledging that and giving that precedence, or maybe not precedence, but giving it a space at the table to actually be brought in. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Can you say
Thank you.
again what the problem is?
The problem of the, let's say, post-enlightenment assumption that we can somehow have an observer-free context. That's actually a coherent thing to do, and that we're capable of doing that, and that's what science is about.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, yeah, thank you.
Does this make no sense at all? Agent arena. Awareness is the agent and the arena. So non-duality. Words.
It does make sense.
Nothing is one
I was
thing.
gonna say, yeah, no, that's basically dialectical monism, where single monad is this duality. And I was gonna say some of what a lot of what they're wrestling with is what Descartes solved with the cogito self-reference, where he was looking for how do I know the thought is true, and the thought that he exists has to be true because he exists. Of its truth, that's how he knew he had a true thought. And that's one way to sort, true thoughts from non-true thoughts. Just going to tag on this.
I'm not going to try to take that apart, but
I
feels very
would.
false
It
to me.
means I think, therefore
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah, but
Yes.
you mentioned truth in there in a couple ways, and knowing how you knew a thing was
But-
true because you thought it. And I was like, what do you mean by true in that sense? Like, I don't know enough about it to really comment.
I think this was pointing more towards the idea that you exist. That's true, and you know that because you think. Like there's this awareness
Like I had
that's
this
looking
thought,
out.
and I'm cogitating on it. Therefore, the thought existed, and it came about from something that was me, maybe, and therefore I exist.
It's
I
not
can
even.
follow
It's not
along in
even
that,
that
but
the.
we to like
excuse
it
me.
is true. I'm like, all right. I don't know if you said that.
I think it's not even that the thought came about, like came from you, and that makes you exist.
Mm.
But it's much more the fact that something is there that's observing the thought wherever it comes from.
Okay. Something.
But it has
right.
been noticed by something.
Yes. Like
And-
you have to be able to agree to that. Otherwise, who's having the conversation about it?
Right. Right.
It only works in real time.
This was Descartes was trying to go from a metaphysical doubt where basically he's trying to be deceived on everything possible. He knows he has these thoughts, but he's wondering if he can even have a true thought. So he's basically in search of a single true thought. And that's where he
And what
came
does he
about,
mean by
that
true
thought.
in that context.
Well,
What does a true thought mean? Is that an original thought? Is that
no,
correct
no. A thought that
provable
has
thought? What are we saying?
a thought that has provable truth value,
Provable
like via
truth
logic.
value.
Yeah,
It's logically true within
like
some
2 + 2
framework.
= 4 sort of thing.
Okay.
There are some universal truths. I mean,
Yeah,
we may turn all we want around, but there are some universal truths.
Descartes going around saying, here's this thought. Is this thought true? How do I test it? How do I know it's true?
Right.
And the thought
conclusion
that he
was
found that was true, the thought that Descartes exists. When Descartes has the thought that Descartes exists, that has to be a true thought, because in order for Descartes to have the thought, Descartes has to exist as a precondition.
I got you. So he was
How do I-
within a framework of that, trying to prove that his statement that Descartes is having thoughts, that we know that or we can accept that is a actual true statement. All right. Within that framework. Now I understand the context of it. Thank you.
I have to say, I'm not sure I agree with Descartes. I don't think you need to feel so you know, and I don't know if you need to know to feel, I think you can actually feel without knowing, and you can know stuff without feeling them. I'm not saying that.
So what would be
it's a concept, it's not like I don't have example, and I don't believe it's a rule.
No, but
either.
so there is a statement that Descartes said, which is, and I kind of missed what it was, and you're saying, and you disagree with that statement.
He says, I think,
Ergo,
therefore I am.
I think, therefore I am.
But the issue with this is that okay, I'm gonna sound like an asshole, but some living beings don't think, you know. And I'm not talking about humans specifically. I'm just talking about, you know, living beings in general. Some living beings exist and they don't need to think, they just exist.
I think the problem here is
Oh,
with
the
the
I am
definition of
part.
thinking. Right. So if you
And
if
what
you
it
if you
means
say
to
hey,
am.
right. So if you say that the starfish, for example, doesn't think, then I would say that is true to the degree that you're saying it doesn't think the same way that a human thinks, probably.
Right.
But there is some form of thought or awareness still. And I think that what Descartes was getting at was really only like the smallest possible statement or state of existence or truth, let's say, that you can get to. And that's, I am aware of something, so I must exist. Or there is awareness, so this awareness must exist. Something like that.
Yes, but
yeah.
does a
Question.
rock need to think to exist? I mean, we can all recognize the existence of an immobile
Therefore, I am.
object.
Yeah, but okay, but so I think, therefore I am does not mean that other things don't exist, because it could be multiple ways to exist. They don't all have to think to exist. He's just saying, I think, and you know, and then has this framework around that as to why that proves he exists. So I
What-
counter your rock argument.
Oh, hold
Question
on,
for
guys.
Graham and
Yeah.
oh, sorry. Question for Graham and Algernon and anybody. What difference is there between asking, what am I thinking? And then the question, how do I know what I am thinking?
I know what
Graham?
I'm
Well,
thinking.
I was going to say the correspondence is to how you know that you're into epistemology.
I mean, right
And that
now, though,
usually,
what am I thinking right now? Like asking what I'm thinking right now is a perspectival question. Asking what am I thinking is a propositional question.
I would argue that there is an issue with your question in the sense that it makes it sound like what a person thinks, a thought, is something that has a beginning and an end. While I perceive thoughts more like art, it's not, you know, it doesn't have a beginning, it doesn't have an end, it continues. You know, people are inspired by generations before and they make new things, but it doesn't come out of nothing. And, you know, it just is. And I think thinking is the same way, you know, we base our knowledge and or deduction from the generations before us or contemporary, but, you know, from somewhere, basically. Which means that really this is a little bit detached from the individual in that sense. You know, it's something that doesn't have a beginning and an end, which means that you can't say, is it an original thought? Where does it begin? Where does it end? You know, I mean, that's my issue with the question. I'm not saying that you can't say, but
that makes sense. Well, I'm suggesting that a thought I'm having is always happening right now, and a thought I'm happening is always about the future or the past. And that's where I can come back to now, or I can go to the imaginary future or the imaginary past. And reframing it to now, bringing my abstractions back to now, is useful.
I was going to say one of the distinctions I would put is between thinking and the thought that's being that the thinking is producing. A thought is basically an object, but thinking is that eternal process. Is sort of how I would tend to frame it.
Eternal, yeah. And so right now,
I am thinking, therefore I am.
That's what Cordelh just said. I think, therefore I am. I wanted to address what Carl said before that, because agent and arena simultaneously, they all one. and I can see how it is true, because everything is happening perceptually in people's brains, like in people's heads. The thought, the perception of reality, the way, like I spoke with Marvin about the cup. So there is a cup, I see a cup, it happened, but the cup, even though it's physically here, you guys all see it in your head. Let's say your awareness of the arenas of your stage, of your like theaters, it's actually all inside the arena that little movies are playing, the seer behind the eyes, the guy who thinks therefore he is, or she is, like whatever, that all is inside the head. Yeah,
Can I
Carl?
push back against that a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
The thing, like I in a way, absolutely, it is happening in my head, but I suggest that is a theory, and that perceptually, where it is actually happening is nowhere. Like if I examine it perceptually, if I evaluate it, if I observe, like Marshall Rosenberg's separate observation from evaluation, observing it, it's happening in heaven, in eternal nothingness. And if I observe it, but it's so unremarkable, and I've been conditioned to ignore that. I think children just are like, why do adults never talk about how my vision is just floating around in darkness? Well, I guess it's not important, and I forget. But with like Douglas Harding's The Headless Way, that's why he calls it the headless way, because I have never seen my head. I see and I've never seen my face. I see your face. I've never seen my face. And then they take
a mirror,
and then they take a child, they put them in front of a mirror, and they go, "Hey, Carl, that's you." And I'm like, "That's me? That looks nothing like me. I'm like this. That's me. Okay, I'll buy it." And I have to pay taxes and eat and get along in society. And it's true in a way, but more perceptually, it's not true. Like if I point at a mirror, I see my arm popping out of.
You're pointing away from where you know your body is.
Well,
yeah, I mean, it's true and not true. I get that it's, you can't see your head in a conceptual way.
It's useful
I
in this
think I
way.
understand the point of it.
But it's not a. It loses it's nonsense in words, but perceptually, it only works right now. I can take no power from it into the next moment. But in the moment that I recognize that, sure, I'm pointing from where I know my body is, but that's actually also a theory. Like what I'm observing, what I'm perceiving is my arm sprouting out of darkness. That's what I perceive. If I point forward, I see nothing, and then I see my arm sprouting out of it. And and that's where the thoughts are happening, is in that darkness, which is, how far away is the darkness from the silence or the emptiness? They're all eternal. So they're all the same place in a manner of speaking.
You make a leap there to where it's coming from this void that you state as a declaration. I don't.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
see it that way. I don't even see it as it. Like, I agree with this idea that we're all carrying around conceptions in our heads. Not quite sure what everybody's meaning by agent and arena. I'm aware of John Vervaeke's, one aspect of that, but then we throw it around kind of lightly and expect everyone has the same definition in their head.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
So I see. So I won't say we all have a little arena in our heads, but we have this conception in our head of like, this is how it is. And I'm not sure there is one that is outside of all of us that, like the objective reality. We might be able to agree on the physical parts, but we deal in so many things that are just abstractions, or, what you think about it, or how you conceive it, or what's your relationship. This is a bad person, that's a good person. We can agree that they have a body, but there's a lot of other things that we hold about these things. And all that space is in our individual heads. And to think that we have like, you know, one consensus version of that is, quote, the capital R reality. I see like a lot of misconceptions around that.
Okay, guys, hold on that thought. We are nearing 3 hours for chapter 12. I have little announcements to make. So first of all, 2 more weeks, Marvin has lost his YouTube channel, which had almost 1,000 subscribers and all his work. He's regathering subscribers. So guys, I provided the link below. Please like, subscribe. Carl has event on awakening from the meaning crisis and also a YouTube channel. I provided the link below, also gather subscribers. I will add the link for the awakening from the meaning crisis later. Cordelh also has a YouTube channel. Please check out, like, subscribe. There are a lot of videos. If you go further, there are even me in there a lot sometimes. And Kevin, I still need your YouTube channel. Graham,
I don't have one. I will probably never have one, but thank you.
So, but you can talk to Kevin on awakening from the meaning crisis if you catch him. He's and
good way to go.
We have poetry events as well. Algernon has post Twitter and awakening. No, not awakening, and a YouTube channel.
Maybe well, yeah, right. Maybe an active YouTube channel someday.
Yeah, with streams about current events and philosophical discussion. I'm really looking forward to it. Graham is an excellent guest. I do hope for Graham's book about multidisciplinary. Yeah, Graham is actually a pretty good story writer. And Carl, the links are under this YouTube video. All of it. So for 2 more weeks, this YouTube video that is live streamed at the moment, I'm closing the stream. All the links to how to find guys and subscribe, and I will in a second add the awakening also invitation. Thank you all so much. That was and another the chapter 13, the final will be on the 13th of May.
Oh, perfect.
So remember, chapter 13, 13th of May, 3 slides. I will post the slides on the server.
13 o'clock somewhere.
At somewhere, actually, I think in California. No, not California. In
I'm sure it'll
Texas.
line up with somebody's time
in
zone.
Texas. In Texas, it will be, I think.
There you go.
Whoever.
Celebration of 13. Maybe not the best.
So yeah, at least it's not Friday. So, so guys, thank you so much. Yes, it's Saturday. Luckily, I checked it. Hold on. Yes, it's.
Isn't there a Pope one time who just added a day or took a day out? I don't remember the details. It's been adjusted.
Okay, stay for the outer party who can stay, and everybody in